Today is Thursday, July 7th, 2016, and the location of the interview is the Veterans Center in Walla Walla, Washington. I am interviewing Bill Ferris, F-E-R-R-I-S, a veteran of the Vietnam War. And Bill left the service as an E5 and was born February the 7th in 1949. Dixie Ferguson and Vic Phillips, a videographer, are conducting the interview today. We represent the Blue Mountain chapter of the American Red Cross. So, Bill, once again, if you were active duty Army from 1967 to 1969, and then the inactive reserve from 1969 to 1973. And just once again, if you'll state the war and branch of service that you were in.
I was in Vietnam, and the branch was the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm. All right. And were you drafted or did you enlist?
I volunteered for the draft.
Okay.
I wasn't quite ready to go right out of high school to college. And I really didn't care to go in for a 3-year commitment. My brother had served a 3-year commitment ahead of me, so I didn't care to go in for a 3-year, so I volunteered for the 2-year draft option.
What were you doing at the time?
I just gotten out of high school.
Right out of high school. And your family said, what?
Well, I left home at 16. I went away to a boarding school by choice. And my family has a long history of military involvement, dating literally back to the Revolutionary War.
Wow, right.
So there wasn't a whole lot of pushback. My brother had been in before me. My dad had been a naval aviator, and then all of his brothers and father and grandfather, etc., had all been involved.
So it was a family legacy.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Kind of maybe even an expectation that that's the way. Did you think that this was what you were going to do, even if there was no war when you were a kid, to join the service?
I had thought about it. Yeah, there wasn't a consideration not to.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just going to say there just wasn't that consideration. The draft was still in; it was still very active, and I had certainly registered for the draft, but before my time or my number came up, I just went down and volunteered.
And where were you at the time?
Tampa, Florida.
Mm-hmm. Is that where you're born and raised?
No. I was born in Denver.
Military family.
And stayed there until I was 5 when my parents divorced. And then we moved to the South. Was pretty much raised on my grandfather's farm, grandparents' farm down in South Georgia. And then we kind of moved around. When I was in high school, we were living in Tampa. And so that was for my freshman and sophomore year. For my junior and senior year, I went away to school into North Carolina. And so upon graduation, I worked for that summer and was scheduled to go in October. So I had about 3 or 4 months off before.
Mm-hmm. And this was 1967.
Yes. And
you were fully aware of war was really getting in full gear, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
So you were aware of all that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
My brother had been over there ahead of me. My brother had gone to Vietnam in 1966. So he was there for actually about 65, and then he was there from 65 to 66, and then he went to Germany.
Army?
Yes, he was Army,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time.
Did that influence you also because of him?
Yeah, I don't think that would be honest to say otherwise. I've always, physically, I've always had to look up to my brother. He's 6'9".
Oh my gosh!
And he ended up he got a scholarship to the Citadel after he got out of the Army, and went back in as a naval officer, and went into the Corps instead.
Okay. Would he have he obviously wasn't too tall for the service then.
Oh, no. No,
Yeah.
he wouldn't have worked in a submarine, but he, he was fine he was in communications at the time, and then as a Marine Corps officer, which he retired from as a major, he was in artillery. He was an artillery officer.
I want to back up a little bit because I want you to talk about your father.
Okay.
And tell me about his service.
Well, he was in the Navy. He and two other brothers, I believe it was, went into the service. Dad and his brother, I just suddenly lost his name, but anyway, two of them went to the Navy, and one uncle went into the Army.
Okay.
And Dad was training as a naval aviator, and just prior to his completing that schooling and getting his commission, the war ended. So he never achieved
The Korean War.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So he got out, but he had a wonderful education, great skills, and he continued to fly for years and years and years, just as a hobby and a love. So
He got the bug.
he did. He did.
And I'm assuming he was at Pensacola.
As a matter of fact, yeah, he at Jacksonville Naval Air Station is where he and my mother met.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember the detail around where he was training. I am assuming part of it was there, part of it was at Corpus Christi, Texas, but he was at Jacksonville Naval Air Station when he and my mother met.
And your dad's name?
Was F.R. Frederick R. Ferris. Everybody knew him as Kelly, or another nickname was Flywheel.
History behind that, I'm sure. Yeah. All right, I just wanted to get that in because you had mentioned him before, and I want to make sure we
thank you.
honored him.
Thank you so much.
In this interview. All right, and so you enlisted. This would have been for 2 years, and where you started training in the fall of '67, and where did they call you to train?
Correct.
Where?
Sworn in at Jacksonville Naval Air Station, and then went to I forget what they call the reception center, I guess, at Fort Benning. And
don't you love that word, reception?
yes.
It's so warm and fuzzy.
But then after that, went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, for medical training as a medic.
And you wanted to be that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting side story to that. When I was there, I called my dad, who was living in California at the time, and it had been about 9 years since I had seen him, so we hadn't been in real strong communication. And so he asked me, well, son, why did you want to go into the medics? I says, well, I just thought it's what I was supposed to do. I felt like that's the right thing to do. I said, why do you ask? And he says, did you realize that you have an uncle that was a medic in World War II in Korea?
You didn't know that?
No.
Wow.
And did you have a grandfather that was a medic with Blackjack Pershing in World War I? And a great-grandfather who was a medic with Sherman in his march through Georgia.
You did not know any of that?
None of that.
That's
I
amazing.
knew none of that.
Had you had some influence in the past, medicine, or an interest in it?
No. I was when I was a grade school. I went to a camp one summer, and one of the speakers at the camp was Desmond Doss, and he was the first. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he was the first conscientious objector to win the Congressional Medal of Honor for action during World War II. And I had the pleasure of meeting him and hearing him speak, and as a kid being able to talk to him. So it was kind of one of those things that I really looked up to that man. I really respected what he had done, what he had accomplished, and the reasons why he did it. So, yeah, there was that emulation factor involved there.
Sure. So after Fort Benning basic training, on over to Fort Sam Houston, and how long was that training for medical, as a medic?
If I remember right, I think it was about 3 months, something like that.
Backing up a little bit back to Fort Benning, that experience for you, can you describe what it was like?
My basic, because I went in as a Seventh-day Adventist, okay? So I went in as a CO, a conscientious objector. So I did not, I was just, I was received into the service, if you will, at Fort Benning. From there, I was shipped to Fort Sam Houston for both basic and medical AIT. So there were two separate events, but at the same post. And so the experience was fine. I didn't have any problem with the physical training at all. I kind of enjoyed it, and made acting, what they do in the basic. They give you acting responsibilities, or acting rank, but you don't get any pay for the acting rank.
What does that mean?
It just meant that I became a team leader, a squad leader, and a platoon leader in basic training for the purpose of helping to guide the
So you're getting into it.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, and I had a good relationship with. There was only one guy that I ended up not having a good relationship with, but he didn't want to be in the Army anyway. So, but my actual leaders, the DIs, my officers, I always got along well with.
I have to ask you, you kind of knew what the risks would be to join while the Vietnam War is going on as a medic. And obviously you still shows that, because that's quite admirable. Well,
thank you. There were a couple of options that I knew could happen. Well, three actually. One, I could stay stateside, go to Europe or Vietnam. As an infantry medic, I did strongly consider going back to jump school at Benning, but then I knew, just assuming kind of no, that was like asking to go to Vietnam. Well, I wasn't quite that dumb at that point. So I decided to...
Patriotism only goes so far.
Exactly. But yet I knew as an infantry medic, the odds are still pretty high that I would be going. And I think out of my AIT company, there were 3 or 4 that did not go to Vietnam.
Luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Okay, while you're in school, I'm assuming there were some folks coming back home that you were talking to from Vietnam?
Not so much. Some of the DIs, some of the trainees, or excuse me, trainers were Vietnam vets. But aside from those, no. Okay. I didn't really meet any of those guys until after I got the orders, and I was shipped from there to Fort Lewis, because we're going to be flying out of Fort Lewis. And that's when I started seeing my first actual returnees, the combat vets coming home. And some at SFO in San Francisco, and just coming through the airports. Sure. You could pretty much see from their salad on their chest where they had been and what their rank was. Patches and whatnot would give you some information there, but
yeah. So it was just 3 months for your medic training?
Well, we had roughly 3 months of basic, and then 3 months of medical training.
That doesn't seem very long.
Because it was from October, end of March, 1st of April early April is when I went to Vietnam. So it was about 6 months after I went into the service that I was in Vietnam.
Did you feel comfortable at the end of those 6 months that you were prepared and ready to go?
Physically, yes.
Training-wise?
Training, yes, but then I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And I was confident in my skills up to the point that I had been taught. And understanding the rationale of behind what we had to do.
And to be more specific, what do you learn? You're going to be a combat medic, so you've got to get into some pretty graphic details,
Mhm.
what to do with battle wounds and things.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's all the stuff you have to learn. Was that a little unsettling, or you were prepared for that?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with any of that. It was intriguing,
Mm-hmm.
but I also realized that it was based in reality, and to consider it anything else would have been self-deceptive.
Right. And you obviously were already aware that you were going to be right out there with the infantry, obviously.
Pretty much.
Okay, anyway, all right. You already had all that thought out. So, okay, you get your orders, and this would have been sometime April.
Yeah,
How did those orders-
the orders came in March.
How did they come to you?
As soon as we finished our AIT training, we were still at Fort Sam, and the orders just came down that this training class, of this training class, and I don't remember how many there were, 30 or 40, 50 of us, I don't remember, but of this training class, everybody's going to Vietnam but what they called us out one at a time, essentially. And as I recall, there were two guys ended up going to Europe. One guy ended up going to either Korea or Japan because he reacted to the vaccines we were being given, and so they weren't going to send him into the combat zone with that kind of reaction.
Otherwise, no rhyme or reason. Just the luck of the draw.
Mhm.
All right. About how many of you went then to Fort Lewis, approximately?
Well, we didn't go as a group,
Mhm.
so I don't really know. I think some. I never saw those guys again
You
after we
never
left.
did?
No, after I left Fort Sam, because I went back I had a 30-day leave before going over, and I spent some time on the East Coast with family and friends, and then a couple of weeks with my dad out in California. But I don't recall
Never seen.
seeing any of them again.
Interesting. Would you have rather just say, hey, let's just get this over with and I want to get going, rather than having a little
Leave? No, no, because it was important just to talk to family, talk to my dad, because like I'd said, we hadn't had a relationship after the divorce, or had a minimal relationship. So as a young adult, it was important to reconnect.
Did
and
you kind of have thoughts in the back of your mind, this could be our last conversation with your family? The reality of the whole thing?
No, because when my dad and I had that conversation about our family history, he walked that back a little bit, and he says, now there's just one more thing, son, I want to tell you. Our family, the Ferris family, has never lost anyone to dead or wounded, so don't you be the first. And the moment that came out of his mouth, I knew I would be hurt, but I also knew I was coming home.
Wow.
I had that confidence.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
Okay, I don't know how to explain it other than that.
That's very interesting, yeah.
So.
And it's just exactly what happened. So we're going to go down that road now. So you're on your way to Fort Lewis after your family leave. And did you just stay a couple of days in Fort Lewis before you went on
It
over?
was about a week, as I recall. It was about a week there, and
Just kind of waiting around?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And
Picked up a lot of cigarette butts. Got soaked, but
You're in the
yeah,
Army now.
yeah.
Okay, so you're on the plane, and was that out of Fort Lewis or Seattle?
McCord. It was out of McCord Air Force Base, which is right there next to Fort Lewis.
And plane packed full of GIs.
It was a Northwest Orient 707 stretch, and it was full of troops. So we flew.
What was
from-
that like going over? Quiet?
Oh, it was. It was very quiet on the plane. There wasn't not a whole lot of discussion. I mean, it wasn't a raucous plane by any stretch of imagination, but I think there was a lot of contemplation going on,
Sure.
and just thinking about what lies ahead. And,
Sure.
actually, some were indeed going to Japan, and then we went from we landed at Tokyo International, and then from there down to I think it was at Kadena.
It was. It sounds like the
believe-
same flight I was on. Northwest over. Yeah.
But then
We stopped at Kadena.
but we weren't. The rest of us, or most of us, weren't allowed off the plane at either stop. And then from there into Cameron.
Cameron Bay.
Mhm.
And do you remember circling around, coming into Cameron Bay, looking out to see the land? Did you have some first impressions?
Yeah, I did.
What
yeah.
were they?
It wasn't so much circling Cameron as it was flying over the coast as we were coming in, as we were approaching Cameron. Looking down there, I could see that it was the water was absolutely gorgeous. It was kind of an aquamarine blue, and it just seemed like you could see, 100 feet down. And then I looked out over the white sands, and then out over into the jungle area, and I just thought, gosh, what a beautiful country this is. And it was hard to reconcile the chaos that was on the ground, that so many were experiencing on the ground, versus what it appeared coming in from the air.
Very surreal.
But it was,
Uh-huh.
it was very surreal in that regard.
Mhm. And so you came into Cameron Bay, and what next? A little orientation?
Yeah. It was, I wasn't prepared for the blast of heat that we experienced, but we ended up being, as I recall, it was like a hangar, an aircraft hangar. I mean, everybody was just rows and rows and rows, with about 10 feet between the rows of duffel bags, and we just hung there until we were told what to do, until we were told where we were going.
And what did they tell you to do?
Oh, man,
Where were you going?
I didn't know for a day or so. Didn't have a clue, but then we got our orders, and that's when they said I was going up to Pleiku, to the 4th Infantry.
4th Infantry,
Mhm.
which, if you'll just describe the region, it'd be northwest.
Of Cameron, be northwest of Cameron,
Mhm.
and roughly halfway up country of South Vietnam, and a little bit over toward the Cambodian-Laotian border.
And were there a group of you going, and how did you get up there?
I forget the type of aircraft, but I think it was a Canadian aircraft where they were short takeoff.
C-130? No?
No, it was a little bit smaller than a C-130. Caribou, that was it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we flew up there. For some reason, flew in a Trang first, and then from the Trang over to Pleiku. And after that, all the transportation was by helicopter.
Mhm. When you first got to Pleiku, did they assign, what was it, a tent? What started happening when you got into Pleiku?
Okay. Just reported there. When I got off the plane, the first thing I noticed was the Canine Units right there near the air base, the airport landing field there, and just the dogs were vicious. They knew none of us, and none of us were handlers. So, and we realized that those were the dogs that were used in the tunnels and various other activities. They piled us on deuce and a halves, and we went down to wherever the receiving area was at Camp Inari. I mean, the landing strip was all part of Camp Inari. It was just a pretty big area.
And if you'll explain it, deuce and a half for the record.
Oh, it's just a truck, 2.5 ton truck, but probably weighed about 15 tons. I don't know.
Right.
I never drove one, never really, other than riding in them. I couldn't tell you much about them. They were rough.
Not a good ride.
No, they were never comfortable rides.
And nothing but good potholes, right?
Yes, and you would feel all of them. Yeah.
Okay, so you were taken over to the camp and then unloaded, and you found your new home, which was a tent?
Yeah. It was a temporary place, and they gave us. We started with an in-country orientation process, and took us out on the. There was a firing range they had. I don't remember where it was in relation to where we were, but they took us out there for everybody that was, to qualify with their M16s, and the rest of the in-country orientation was what to do and what not to do as far as the locals were concerned, to be respectful of the locals, what to do, not to do when you go into town, just kind of general cautions and precautions to be aware of, and general etiquette as far as the people were concerned.
Did you carry an M16,
No.
you yourself?
No.
No weaponry?
No, that's
You were
correct.
protected by your squad?
By my platoon.
Platoon.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did that seem a little eerie to you?
It was. Some of the guys were uncomfortable with it at the beginning, but I was raised with weapons. I didn't have a problem with carrying a weapon in that regard. My problem was I knew at the time I had always been really short-tempered, quick to anger, and if somebody did something to me, my reaction was more tended to be more violent, more aggressive, and I didn't want that element to beset what I was there to do. And that was part of my own personal rationalization. The more public persona had to do with I was being a good Seventh-day Adventist.
Still at the time you were?
Yeah, so I was still
practicing?
Yeah. And but I wasn't concerned or afraid of weapons at all, because I was raised around them.
And what was the logic for a medic not to be armed?
There was no logic unless you went in with that kind of a predetermined conviction or I guess cultural, because from the religious culture that I was raised in, that was kind of an understood. If you were going to go in, you go in as a CO, conscientious objector.
Right, but for other medics, was it true across the board that medics were not armed?
Oh, no. Many medics carried 45s. Well, I was offered a 45 when I got out into the field.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
and
that
as far
was
as I
my-
know, most of them did carry.
That was my misunderstanding. Okay. but
Most
as
of them
a
did carry, as I
conscientious-
understood.
Sure, okay, gotcha. By the way, that brings up another point for you not being armed. Did that create any problems with the others that were armed?
At first, there was some trepidation on the parts of some of the guys. I had one officer, a lieutenant. No, this guy was a captain. He came and told me you know, you have every right to let them kill you, but you don't have a right to let them kill somebody else. And there was never a question in my mind that I would not stand by and willfully allow them to kill one of my own guys. And that's what I told him. I says, well, if you've got that concern, Captain, just perhaps you could be the officer when we go into combat, and we'll just see how it all works out. I says, because I would be there for you just as quickly.
Good answer. Yeah, good answer.
So, and the guys got comfortable with that. They didn't seem to have, because I didn't have a problem pulling all of my duties. Mm-hmm. I shared guard duty with them. I didn't. There were certain things that, because I was on 24/7, I was on duty 24/7. There were certain things that they did not assign me to do.
Yeah, but you were doing guard duty. But how did that work out if you're not armed?
Well, I was armed as far as what we had available on guard duty, because I was in charge of. I had access to the Claymore detonators. I had, there's an M16 here next to me. I knew how to fire it. I had a 45 available. I knew how to fire it, and did. But it was just, I wasn't going to have it on me all the time. Okay. It was just my own conviction at that point. Mm-hmm. But I pulled my share of the responsibility on guard, and
you mentioned, well, I'm sorry, Doss, what was this?
Desmond
Doss,
mm-hmm.
The Medal of Honor. So my guess would be that oftentimes you would go overboard to prove your medal, so to speak, as a CO. Am I right about that? Anybody who was a CO?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't recall ever thinking about that. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that perhaps it didn't happen, mm-hmm. but
you were there I
don't remember consciously going through that process, that mental process. Mm-hmm. I was there. My job was there to take care of these guys as they got hurt, or came down with any kind of an illness. Just I was there for their well-being, mm-hmm. and it didn't take too long before guys from other platoons were coming over.
Interesting. Meaning what?
Coming over to me mm-hmm. for certain things. That they needed things taken care of. They needed stitches or needed stitches removed. They didn't like their own medic, so they would come over to me to take whatever care they needed to have done.
So obviously you had special skills.
I ended up having a very good rapport with my guys in my platoon, as well as guys in other platoons as well.
So it was the word of mouth that got out.
I think so.
Sounds like it to me.
I think so.
Yeah, okay, so you've got settled in, and what, before too long, did you get assigned to a platoon right away?
I think it was probably about a week, maybe not quite a week. I'll say 2-3 days of in-country orientation. And I remember we were sitting in one of the classrooms going through this thing when some guy comes in and taps about, I think it was 4 of us on the shoulder and says, come with me. So when we got outside the tent, he says, you guys just volunteered for KP at the General's Mess. The only time in the service I ever pulled KP, and it was in Vietnam for the General's Mess.
Know, did you peel potatoes?
Gosh. No, I washed a lot of dishes, though. A lot of dishes. I don't remember all the potatoes, but I don't remember peeling all the potatoes.
That's an important job, washing those dishes.
Yeah. And for, I think there was a general staff of about, I want to say about 19. I don't remember exactly, but man, those guys went through a lot of dishes for a particular meal. It would take us 2 or 3 hours to clean up after every single meal, and we were on for 72 hours. And
that's probably not quite what you had in mind when you went to Pleiku, but whatever. You're in the Army now.
Now, what was one of the other interesting things is that somebody, I don't know who it was, but signed a K, what they called a KP pusher to us. And that was just to keep us in line and keep us going, with what we were supposed to do.
Pusher.
And after about the first day, like we were scheduled there for 72 hours. So after the first day, he comes up to me, the KP pusher did, and says, I notice these guys kind of follow your lead. How come they don't respond to me? And I says, well, the bottom line is we're here to do what we're here to do, and we're going to take care of the general and his staff here as far as this kitchen and cleaning up the messes are concerned. You hanging over our shoulders, pushing us and harassing us, and continuing to do what you do doesn't encourage us, and it doesn't help us, because we're going to do it with or without you. So you could make it a lot easier on yourself if you just maybe went down to the local store or whatever and had a good
The
good
pusher
time.
was taking his job too seriously.
Oh, he was kind of full of himself, and he was we were all E1, E2s, and he was I think he was an E3 or maybe a 4, I don't recall exactly, but he took it way too seriously.
Yeah, he was on his way to the next stripe.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you got beyond the KP duty, and then the next assignment.
Well, the next assignment was, and I don't remember the time frames, but it was very quick in there. Was that we were going to fly out and be assigned. I was going to go out to the unit I had been assigned to, and that was the 1st Battalion, 35th Regiment of the 4th IT. So went out there, and I'm trying to remember, there were a couple of LZs that we were on,
Landing zones.
that they had been on, and so I don't remember exactly which one. There were two main ones that I recall. What we referred to as LZ Dogbone. It was two hills that were connected by a ridge. So from the air, it looked kind of like a dog bone. Mm-hmm. And as I recall, that's where they first dropped me off.
Do you remember that day?
Yeah, sort of vaguely. It was out in the middle of nowhere. I don't remember.
And nowhere looked like what?
Jungle everywhere, jungle all around us, and then the top of this hill was both hills were fairly bare. On the other hill over there, the connected hill was a 155 battery. So
artillery.
Mm-hmm. And so I went in, met the guys in my platoon and my commanding officers there, and just kind of melded in with the group. And
were they going out beyond the landing zone, or
there were groups. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
there were squads that were going out, and that was where, in one instance, this is where some of these other guys from other platoons were coming to me. During that process, there was one lieutenant that the guys described him as kind of the self-proclaimed Audie Murphy of Vietnam. He was going to be the most heroic, the most
that can get you hurt.
Yeah, of the guys in Nam, and from their perspective, he was putting them at a lot of risk, and so there was discussion of him not coming back if the guys got into a fight out there, but thankfully that didn't happen. Certainly not that way, but.
Now, were you, by the way, was there a field hospital where you were assigned in Pleiku, Or was there kind of like a MASH, any type of a MASH? Or most of the time you were just hanging out with the platoon?
Yeah. As a medic, I was in the field with them. The only time I was ever in a medical evac was at the 71st Evac Hospital there in Pleiku when I came back through as a patient. I didn't even know it existed. I hadn't seen it
You
when
had
I was
not
there.
seen it.
I had not been there. So I never saw it until I came back through as a patient.
Okay, so are you going out with the platoon daily? Is that what you were doing?
Mhm.
Could you describe a typical mission?
Well, it wasn't daily. I don't remember how long we were there on that LZ. I remember 2 weeks, maybe 3. I just don't remember, Dixie. But yeah, we would go out on little short trips and missions out that just sort of reconnaissance kind of things. Or
Could you kind of describe what it is, if there was anything typical about him? What was it like?
No, it was just we just kind of lined up and followed whoever was out in front. Nobody ever discussed with me what the operational goals were, what we were going out there to achieve.
You had no
I
idea?
had no idea
Oh my
what we were
gosh.
going out there to achieve. I
What
just
did
knew.
you think you were going out to do?
I guess look for him to see if Charlie was out there anywhere, and if so, engage him. But aside from that, no, I didn't. It wasn't until we permanently left LZ Dogbone. That was when I became aware that we were getting our first major set of orders where at least I knew what we were supposed to be doing, and it was described to me as an official search and destroy.
Okay,
And
now
it was-
this is 1968,
Yes, yeah,
and you're pretty close to the Cambodian border.
yeah.
About how close do you think?
Well, by that time we were up closer to Dakto and Kontum, so we were over there pretty close. I don't remember if it was 10 or 15 kilometers.
That's close.
I never worried about those distances or thought about those distances that much. Looked on the map, so I'm just gauging it from that. But I think there was some discussion about being about 15 clicks
And
from,
real close to the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
yeah.
So, and you probably knew all about the infamous Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Well, I knew about it, but I certainly didn't know all about it. I just knew that it was an area that they were extremely concerned about, and that was the method and the means in which they brought supplies. The North Vietnamese brought supplies into the South. I knew that it went over into Cambodia and Laos, and there was tremendous underground tunnels.
Even up there.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
and bunkers and things. Because I got down into a couple of goop bunkers that we came across, and just got in there because they had water in them. So I got down there to get some water.
Mhm.
But those guys were good. They were good hole diggers, I can tell you that. Those walls are about as smooth as these walls in here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You started to talk about then a major search and destroy.
Mhm.
So that was your next experience then. And could you describe, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but if you'll describe what a search and destroy mission means.
Well, it's my understanding that you go out and you search for the enemy and you destroy him.
Simple as
It's
that.
that simple.
Mhm.
And
Based on certain intelligence.
yeah, and that would be intelligence that the LERPs had gone out, had achieved that information, gotten that information, brought it back in, and then our officers, our commanders, based their strategies and decisions on that intel.
And the way you were getting around mostly was by helicopter or
Mhm.
hiking?
Well, any major distances, it was all helicopters. I mean, when when we went out on that, there was a 35 helicopter combat assault that was on. And I don't remember how far we flew, but it was out near, we went into Dakto, but there was a small place on the outside of Dakto that everybody referred to as the LZ Mickey Mouse. I don't know how it got the name. Could care less. But I mean, the big Chinooks came in there. A lot of Hueys came in there, and that's how we went out there, was on the Chinook. So
I need to ask you at this point, and this is not a trick question at all. Did you understand fully the mission of America in Vietnam? When you joined, when you got over there, did anything change, or what were you thinking about the mission? Not a trick question.
No, and I think it was a fair question. From my perspective, my understanding, we were there to stop the movement of communism, the spread of communism to places other than where everybody knew that it was China and Russia and North Korea.
Was that a common belief then amongst you guys?
Oh, we really didn't. I don't remember discussing that element of it all that much, to be honest with you. That was certainly my conviction. I love this country, and I love what this country has stood for. And even today, to have someone come in and start espousing a bunch of communist or socialist views, it just doesn't settle with me. Just doesn't settle with me. So it's.
So you're basically, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you felt like it was a noble cause.
I did. Yeah.
And did you, and I interrupted you, but did you get to meet any of the villagers at all? Was there any interaction? You probably saw them, but no really interaction with them. Yeah. Just to see the kids, see the lives, their lifestyle, what their world was like.
I was very, in many respects, very naive, and I wasn't a big risk taker, and I would, I never ate, for example. I never ate any of the local cuisine.
Cuisine.
I wouldn't do it. I was not going to take the chance.
Absolutely.
So if it didn't come out of our own mess halls or out of my C rations box, I didn't eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I had sidetracked you for a minute, but you went out on the search and destroy. And how long was that? Could you describe it?
Well, it was originally set up to be 15 days, a 15-day search and destroy operation.
Seems like a long time.
Yeah, I didn't know, and so we were, when our helicopter was in the air, there was, like I said, 35 of them headed out there for this drop zone. And when I got in the helicopter, I heard the pilots talking and the communications going on, and everything is green, it's a go, it's looking good, so we should get in there, drop everybody off, and get back with no problem. Well, while we were in the air, the LZ turned red, and then I got a little bit more worried because I knew that we'd meaning that when they were dropping them, when helicopters were dropping these guys off, the choppers were taking fire. They were being shot at. So Charlie was in the area, and close enough to try to take out these helicopters that were dropping off the troops. And I don't remember how many troops were dropped off ahead of us, but there were about 6 or 7 of us on a chopper, and I was the first off of my side of the chopper. I was the first one out,
How, were you like just way down there at the ground?
No, it was about as high as this room. That chopper came in about as high as this room
You
and
dropped down.
just jumped and turned and waited to watch all the rest of the guys in my group out of my chopper to make sure that they hit and weren't hurt when they hit, didn't injure themselves. And then we just started scrambling because we could hear the gunfire and whatnot. So.
Wasn't that a shock? My gosh, someone's trying to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
really-
it's unnerving when it's an
Another
unnerving
surreal.
position.
Yeah, I don't even know this person. They're trying to kill
Exactly.
me.
Yeah.
It's very weird. By the way, on yourself, what does a medic carry?
I had my obviously my flak jacket and helmet, and I had 2 medic bags. I carried 4 canteens because I knew a lot of times that it wasn't just me, but others would need the water, and so I carried that on their behalf as well. And my own personal stuff.
I mean, literally bandages?
Oh yeah,
Of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
all-
yeah. A
of
lot of
course.
bandages, some morphine syrettes, salt tablets, Monday pills. It was the chloroquine for malaria,
Malaria.
anti-malarial,
Mhm.
and just mostly that sort of stuff. I carried a lot of that because I wanted to be prepared.
Of course.
Um,
And did you feel a special protection because you are the medic?
Well, once I knew that the guys and I got along, they understood why I was taking the stance that I did, or why I had taken the stance that I had. And I'm not saying that it necessarily was the wisest thing, because there was a lot of naivete that was associated with that decision. But yeah, they were there as much for my protection as they were for themselves.
Yeah, and maybe I should have asked it in more of a general sense. A medic is always going to be
Oh,
protected. I guess I should have asked it.
Yeah,
that
I
way.
think so.
Uh-huh.
I think so.
Sure, for obvious reasons. And
Yeah.
the radio man.
Yeah. It was, they told us when we were in country that the average lifespan of a medic was 6 weeks.
Ooh.
And it was my understanding, I heard later on that there was only one other position, or MOS, if you will, that had a shorter one than a medic, and that was a door gunner.
Is it door gunner because
Huey.
exposed?
Oh yeah, because
So
they
exposed.
were just exposed out there.
Mhm.
And the number that I heard there was 4 weeks. Theirs was about a 4-week life expectancy, but I don't know. I never.
Wow. Boy, that's a.
I just knew I didn't want to be one.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you're in this hot zone,
Mhm.
and what's next?
Well, we're at this point. We're kind of scrambling for cover to get in behind grasses and whatever else, so that they couldn't see us where we were. And I guess it was one of my first big shocks. I was on my hands and knees and moving through this elephant grass, and I came into this little clearing that was about the size of that table right there, where the grass had just been all pressed down. And on my hands and knees, as I came out from the grass into this little clearing, right next to me on a stick was this guy's head, and he still
An
had
American?
no,
Oh,
he was a Vietnamese guy, and the skin was still there, the eyes were still there, the hair was still there, but it was just his head sticking on a stick. And so, well, that was interesting. So I ultimately let my.
Was that a message?
I think it was. That's kind of certainly how I took it. That this is what we do to. And I don't know if that was if he was a local who had been beheaded because he was perhaps helping the Americans, or just because somebody else had, the Kong had just decided he wasn't doing what they wanted, so they took him out. I don't know. Maybe he could have been a Kong. I don't know.
So this was really your first day of real war.
That one was, yeah. We had been, oh no, because it was out from there that we received, I think we were ambushed about 2 or 3 times over the next several days.
How did that work out? I mean,
Not comfortably.
Do you mind going into that? How that happened? What happened there?
Well, you're going along minding your own business, and then all of a sudden you realize that there's a bunch of people out there trying to kill you.
2 or 3 in the next few days?
Well, no, there was like 2 different ambushes. I don't think there was 3. There's 2 different ambushes that took place over the next, I think it was 8 or 9 days, and it was just a matter of what they told us was if you can live through the first 30 seconds of an ambush, you can live through the rest of it, because the first 30 seconds were the most deadly. That's when nobody was expecting it.
Sure.
Okay, so they had certain people in their sights when they initiated. So
was anybody killed or injured?
No.
Wow.
No. Thankfully they weren't very good shots at that point.
Wow.
But it was I forgot what I was going to say about that one.
What?
But anyway.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I distracted you on that. But so you were continuing on. Did you keep moving at all times?
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
all times.
Yeah. Except at night. I mean, you'd have to stop at night to rest up, bivouac wherever you were. And
how could you rest at night? How could you sleep? Were you just dug into the ground? I mean, what was it
every
like?
night, I'm a fairly good-sized guy, and I got tired of digging holes for myself every night, big enough to get in, because I felt after a while like I was digging my grave. Just weren't.
Oh,
I didn't like using that little shovel all that much, but there was a lot of digging every single night in a different location.
Okay, well, did you literally make a size in the ground just for the size of yourself?
Yeah.
And were you in deep enough? Or how?
Well, what's interesting is, and of course we'd be fast forwarding a little bit, but I'll back up from the ambush. Once that was all over with, I truly don't remember how much time we were in that location. I don't remember that there was any killed on either side, but I just don't remember. All I knew is that we were I was there making sure that if anybody in my outfit, my unit got hurt, that I was there for them. And I would just went to each one of them and checked them to make sure that they were.
Which exposed you.
Yeah, it would expose me to go to where they were, wherever they were.
Were you all kind of newbies out there?
Well, I certainly was. There was a couple of other medics that had been out there, but their guys didn't like them, because they were coming to me. Some of them were coming to me, and I don't know why. Nobody really told me why.
Again, it must have been a word of mouth, the reputations.
Because
it had to be if there were a number of you that were fresh out in the field. It had to be pretty unsettling. As you're moving forward with the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the understatement. So were you moving pretty much every day? Were you were making contact a lot?
No, we weren't making contact every single day.
Mm-hmm.
There was we certainly found evidences of Charlie being in the area. Areas that they had been at perhaps the night before, 2 or 3 days before. there was, we were coming across this river between the mountains. That were coming across this river, and I remember as I was in the middle of the river, I could hear the Vietnamese, but all I heard was that I could understand was the word GI being relayed. You could hear it relayed, just GI, GI, GI. And then we found commo wire coming up out of the other side of the river. And so we knew they were out there. We didn't know how many were there or exactly where they were, but because we could hear them, we knew they were close by.
Very creepy.
It is creepy, and it was unnerving for me anyway, because when you're out in the middle of a river, you're pretty exposed. Yeah. It wasn't a big river. I mean, it was maybe as wide as this room, but shallow. I think I came up to about my chest or something. So we
How'd
just...
you get dried out?
Oh, you just...
The sun is so hot.
Well, at that time, no, because it was the monsoons were in. We were wet anyway.
How about your boots?
Every night I'd take my boots off and wring my socks out, and I'd sleep on them on my chest, so hopefully that the body heat would help dry them out. But then I just end up putting wet socks back on the next day.
Miserable.
But took them off at night so my feet could dry out,
Just miserable.
air out.
And obviously no shower facilities.
No, not for many days.
And as far as eating, did you feel like you were getting enough to eat out there in water?
Yeah.
Well, you're no problem.
Yeah,
with that.
I don't
Were
remember
you
ever
getting-
being hungry.
Never were.
I don't remember ever
No.
feeling like I was hungry.
Did you ever have any minor injuries like scrapes?
Just leeches,
Oh, yes.
leeches and mosquito bites, but that's just part of the train. No,
It's
otherwise,
amazing.
no.
How was
What
the
is it?
morale? These first few.
It was
days?
good.
Mhm.
It was good.
Mhm.
I had one guy that was on my case about wanting to go back to Pleiku, and so he was constantly coming up with new ailments that he had, trying to get out. And so I discussed it with my platoon leader, and he just told me it was my call. He said, if you think it's legitimate. I said, well, I know his wife is due to have a baby, and I said he's concerned, he's worried about that. But I said the Red Cross will let us know when she has the baby, and hopefully we can get him back there and at that time to be able to talk to his
Yeah, a
wife.
lot of
and stuff.
responsibility.
So.
So you're pressing forward, so you were out there for 2 weeks. No helicopter, no support activity.
Well, the helicopter was, oh man, we got some. I think there was some additional C rations that were brought out to us, but on that. During that search and destroy operation, I don't remember any other air support coming in that regard. We had what we had with us.
Maybe I asked this already. Were you constantly on the move? It would be
Pretty much, as I recall, we didn't stay the night after we left Mickey Mouse. We didn't stay in one place. I don't recall staying in the same place twice.
Would you just keep moving until it got dark, and then you would just camp out? Is that how that worked?
Well, the platoon leaders, our company commander and lieutenants and whatnot, I'm assuming that they had orders to go in certain directions, and that was kind of the understanding that I had at the time. Because they weren't obligated to tell me anything. I was just there to follow orders and go where they said to go. So I didn't concern myself with much else other than that.
But it was always dark when you camped out then?
Oh yeah. We'd stop before dark and have time to set up, cut an LZ. If we needed the support, helicopters would come in and land.
Yeah, this is a creepy question, but you're bedding down for the night. Didn't you always sleep with one eye open? Did you have kind of like a little perimeter guard?
Well, we did. We had perimeter guards every night.
Obviously,
Those were set up, but
How did you know that there weren't going to be 500 overrunning you?
well, we didn't at first. We didn't.
Again, getting back to sleeping with one eye open. I mean, did you ever fully sleep at night? Or maybe you got so tired you did?
Well, yeah, the depth of sleep is probably would probably be where the question would come in. I don't recall there was ever any deep sleep. I remember I could sleep through having the 175s and the 155s and 105s going off in a distance. I could sleep through that, but I was aware it was happening. But I was just aware, subconsciously aware that these explosions were taking place
Maybe it was kind
at
of
a distance.
comforting.
But I was never able to sleep through light weapons fire. If anything started, or grenades or that sort of thing, if those started popping, then we were all awake
Sure.
very quickly.
Any mail, M-A-I-L, at all, out there?
Yeah, but not on a daily basis. We'd get it, and come to think of it, that is the kind of the one supply that we would get. I don't recall specifically on that search and destroy if we got mail out there that time. I knew on the LZs, the LZ Dogbone and Mickey Mouse and Oil, we did get mail there. But on that first major helicopter assault, I don't recall seeing any mail coming in.
Well, I'm taking extra time to describe the experience of what a combat veteran goes through in a war
Okay.
zone. And that's what I'm trying to do
Okay.
for the record, because I just think this is a specific information that, we all need to try to understand. Can't walk in the boots, but try to understand, what is a war zone like? The quiet times, the hot action times, but okay, so you're getting to the end of your 2 weeks on that one then, and things were okay, no injuries, no fatalities, nothing
No,
like
that was just like we weren't even into it 8 days yet. We were just in there a little bit longer than a week.
And then at some point you're called back into Pleiku, into base
No,
camp. You
no.
never were.
No, not at this point.
You stayed at the LZ.
Yeah, because the mission was supposed to be for 15 days, and we were about 8 days into it, and that was that 8th day when I was crossing that river, and I heard the communications going out, and we found their commo wire, the commo wire out there. Followed that up to the top of the hill. So when we all got to the top of that hill, that's where we decided to bivouac that night, and that was I believe the 8th night we had been out. And there were 3 companies. There was Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie Company. I had been assigned to Bravo. And we just sat up on different areas on this knoll, this hill, the top of this hill, and cut an LZ that evening so the helicopters could land if they needed to come in. And then it was just a matter of, to set up the perimeter. I wasn't involved in setting up the perimeter, but I knew it was being done. They were down there digging their bunkers to set up the M60s on, and we sent after all that was done. I remember the chaplain had come out with us. He was out there that night, and he was just kind of walking around to each of the guys he could find and talking to them and seeing how everybody was doing. We were pretty sure that something was going to happen, and so I remember I had agreed to do guard duty like from 4 to 5 in the morning. And this other guy was taking it from like 8 to 9. Well, he wanted to switch with me. And I told him no, I wasn't going to switch with him that night. Any other time I would have switched with him, and I truly don't know why I didn't. Because I didn't have a rational reason for not switching with him. But I didn't. And I was sitting there, I think I was eating some of those crackers and peanut butter or something out of the C rations, and kind of monitoring the next hooch over, monitoring what these guys were saying, because we'd already sent our LPs out on the outside of the perimeter, our listening post. And then they had told us that they were going to fly us out the next morning. Okay, because the word that I remember hearing was that they realized we were right in the middle of an NVA regiment, and so.
And that would be about how many?
I don't know. I remember just thinking that it was a lot. In my head, I was thinking maybe 1,000. I don't know if it would be 1,000 or not. But I just remembered it just sounding like a lot, because again, I wasn't there long enough to really get my head around what the troop strengths and troop formations in the North Vietnamese Army, in that hierarchy. What did a North Vietnamese division, how many was that? How many was in a regiment? I don't know in that regard, because I just wasn't there long enough to really get a handle on all of that. But I was listening, sitting there eating and listening, and I heard this guy say from the LP, just said, he clicked the radio and said, "Sir, I distinctly heard a rifle drop." And then right after he said that, I could hear the mortars going off, and they started shooting. And
so they were shelling your position?
Yeah, they knew where we were, and they were coming up the hill at us. So I don't know, that went on and on and on, and it was just a lot of firing. By this time it was dark, continued to rain, and there was a break in the clouds, because I remember seeing the moon sort of behind a small thinning of clouds. And
was it constant firing?
yeah,
Constant.
yeah, it was constant. And I remember, because I dug my hole that night, and I was so tired of digging a hole for myself every night. Mine was just about, that night it was about maybe 3 feet square and about 12 inches deep. I'm thinking I just enough for me to get in and curl up, you know. And then when that happened, when the mortar started coming in, and I got in there and curled up, I realized my shoulder, you know, from about my neck over was exposed above ground level. So that's when I got out and I really started digging, and I didn't.
Motivated.
Yeah, there was a lot of motivation, and I don't know how long it took me to dig it, but I was down so I could pretty much be on my knees, and my head was below the ground.
By the way, right there, being on your knees figuratively, you had a strong faith at that time?
Yeah, I did.
Mm-hmm. Were you praying a lot?
Well, at that time, after I was there, and knowing what was going on around me, nobody at that point, had been screaming for medic. Okay, and the guys that were close enough to me, I could see them, and I could talk to them, communicate with them. And so as soon as I got curled up in my little hole, that's when I started really thinking about things, and thinking about what was going on around me. That is when I started praying, and it was just, God, don't let anybody start screaming medic. You know, that was what I was there for. So maybe it was a dumb prayer, but
it's pretty real.
It was, as soon as he didn't listen, because as soon as I got it out of my mouth, then I started hearing a lot of guys start screaming.
A lot?
Yeah, it came from all directions at that point, because we had 3 companies out in situated around the top of that hill. And
Was that just chaotic?
it was, but I focused on my group where I knew my guys were set up for the night, and I stayed with them and took care of them. Some of them were hurt, some of them, some hurt badly, some less badly, and
Was it just you then just you or the one medic?
for my platoon.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there were I don't remember how many other medics that there were out there, but I had taken care of the guys in my unit, the ones that had been hurt.
How many would you
And I would
say?
say maybe 6.
That's enough.
You know.
Keeping you busy.
Yeah, it was. And
Were they crying out? I mean, was there just a lot of fear and panic? Or
well, there were some of them that were crying.
Sure.
Not sobbing cry,
Sure.
but
Scared.
calling out scared.
Sure.
And what I learned was that those that were seriously hurt were not the ones calling for medics. It was their buddies that were calling for a medic to come over.
Mm-hmm.
And after, I don't know how long a period of time it was, maybe an hour, I don't know. But I went to my lieutenant and I said, everybody in our unit is covered right now. Everybody's taken care of. Alpha Company seems to need a lot of help. Do I have permission to go over there and help out? And I said, I'll check back with you periodically. He says, that's fine. So I went over there. And that's when I saw that officer that nobody else liked, that was taking all the risks by taking these small squads out that he may have needed the firepower of a platoon if they got into it. I watched him get it that night, and
Was he seriously wounded?
he was killed.
He was killed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was, I don't know what made him do it, but he decided he was going to run down to the perimeter or back up from the perimeter. I don't remember at this point, but I watched him get it. He just kind of sort of like wrapped around a tree and fell to the bottom.
Pretty heavy visual, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you tended to the A.
Well, I went over there and I don't remember if somebody told me or if I was just following the screams, but I ended up going down on the perimeter because I could see that's where a lot of the action was taking place, or most of the action was taking place. And this guy, I remember his name was Philip, but I don't recall his last name. He had been operating the M60 on the perimeter, and he was laying halfway out of his hole, just kind of like that. And some other guy yelled to me, he says, "I think it's his legs, Doc." And I reached in and grabbed his belt, pulled him out of the hole, and that's when I realized that one leg was gone from just below the knee, the other leg was gone just above the ankle. But the one that was above the ankle, all the meat was gone off of the bones up to just below the knee.
How could you be prepared for those kinds of injuries? Tourniquet?
Oh yeah, I was prepared for that, and that was what I knew that I needed to do, because right there I could see Charlie. I mean, he was coming up the hill, because they were tripping the flares that we put out for the perimeter, and so we could see him
Did you think you
coming.
were going to make it? Did you think you were
I
going
didn't
to
think about. I didn't think about that.
You did not think?
No, I didn't think about that at that point.
Just working.
Yeah, it was just a
adrenaline.
matter of working, and
But I interrupted you.
so I grabbed him and pulled him up out of the hole, and that's when I saw his legs, and so I put tourniquets around his legs, both legs, and then I wanted to get us both out of the line of fire so I could tend to him a little more in more detail. And just assess him better. So I pulled him, I don't know, maybe it's the length of this room, I don't remember. And to get us both out of the line of fire, try to get him behind some shrubs and bushes. And as I did, as I was pulling him by his collar, the back of his collar. Another medic says to me, he says, "Doc, you're too high." And I realized that I'd worked myself up into a hands and knees crawl for leverage, because I was pulling this guy through was probably 4 or 5 inches of mud, because the monsoons had been in there had been raining for 8 days. And so I flattened out, and then I reached back to grab him again by the collar, just an extra tug, get him in behind the bushes. And in that pulling motion, I lifted my leg, because by this time I'm on my belly, and I'm pulling on him, and I lifted my leg for leverage, not even thinking about it. And as soon as that happened, the first bullet hit my leg, lifted me up, twisted me over, and the second bullet hit in the back. And
so who came to your rescue?
well, nobody at first, because nobody knew I was hurt. And
so you're both there together in dire straits.
And the only saving grace that I knew that I'm thankful for at that point was that I had put the tourniquets on his legs, so that and I hadn't been able to assess how far he had bled out, or to what extent he had bled out. I didn't know how long he had been there before I got there, because he was in another company.
Was he kind of in a state of shock?
Oh yeah. All I could hear was just a couple of grunts and moans when I got up to him. He wasn't responding at all. There was no verbal response at all, just moans. And so I knew he was alive. There was still life there.
Did he make it?
No, no, he didn't make it.
And then for you now, your condition.
Well, I thought the sensations of the bullets hitting was, I thought I got it. I know I got it in the leg, the
what
back.
What part of your leg were you hit?
Just below the knee, the calf of my leg. It went on the outside of my leg, and then the second bullet went in at the base of my spine and came out on the side.
And you were not paralyzed from
No,
this?
no, it was because as my body was twisting from the first bullet, it was in that rotating action when that second bullet hit. So had it hit me maybe, I don't know, a half a second or later, then I would have been perpendicular to where the bullet came in, and then I may have had a lot of spinal damage at that point. But at this time I was rotating when that second bullet hit, so it just kind of ricocheted off the top of the outside of my pelvis. And just.
Did you feel pain?
Oh yeah, yeah. When the one hit me in the back, I remember an image. It's kind of a silly image, but it's what it felt like. The impact was massive, but it felt like I sort of imagined the Jolly Green Giant standing over me with a sledgehammer and just coming across my back with a sledgehammer, because it bent me double backwards. And moved me from the impact of the bullet. And then it was just a matter of, I laid there and I thought, you got it in the leg, the back, and the ankle, thinking that I had gotten it in the ankle as well. So.
Was anybody around you at the time?
Well, there were lots of people were around, but not right there immediately with us, with Philip and I. And
by the way, did you know Philip?
No, I just learned his name. I don't remember if the guy told me that had been down on the perimeter with him, or if I got it off of his fatigues. I don't remember. But anyway, I remember laying there thinking, well, trying to assess myself. Well, I'm not going to apply any tourniquets, because if I apply a tourniquet and don't manage it correctly, I'll lose my leg. And so then I just started waiting. I thought, oh, well, I'll just wait until I can feel. If I feel myself go, then I'll apply the tourniquet. And then somebody came. I put the first bandage on my own leg, but I couldn't do anything about my back. And another medic came and took over with Phil, and he asked me, can you get to the CCP on your own, the casualty collecting point? And I said, I think so, yeah. So I just rolled over and started crawling. But what was interesting, just prior to that, after I stopped turning and laid down, by this time I was face down in the mud, and I put my arms like this and rested my forehead on my arms to keep my face out of the mud. I just kind of put my head down. I thought, well, the war's over for me. That's just what I thought. And I said, well, God, if it's my time to go, help Mother and Dad to understand. And that's when I started processing. Well, it might not be that bad. You got it in the leg, you got it in the back, and so that's when I started that processing. And somebody came in and asked me if I could get to the CCP, so I did. And but I got over there and
by yourself.
Yeah, I got myself over there, and just hung out.
Well, bullets were still flying.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what hit you?
It was a AK-47.
Wow. That'd get your attention.
Yeah. And they were, I assume, maybe they weren't from the same weapon, or from perhaps an automatic burst, but it happened so fast. The first bullet hit, and then the second bullet hit.
So it was two bullets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're over at the collection point, and how long did this battle go on for?
Total, it was about 9 hours.
Ooh,
it was about 9 hours, the whole thing. I was medevaced out 9 hours after it started. I was medevaced out about, I think it was around 4:30. I want to say about 4:30 in the morning.
Okay,
Our resupply came in, actually. A medevac didn't come in. I was taken out on a resupply.
How far into the battle was it before you got hit? How many hours into the battle would you say?
I'd say probably 2.
2 hours. And 9 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got out of there, how many more hours then? How long were you actually there altogether?
Well, until I got out, like at 4 in the morning. So I laid there with all this going on for about 8 hours, for about 6 hours, 7 hours.
I cannot imagine
And
that.
I remember this guy walked out of this hooch, and I don't remember how many other guys were there that were wounded, but what turned out to be a captain came out of his hooch and didn't see me, and he put his boot right in my leg, and just I came unglued and said a few used a few choice words, and he dropped right down there next to me on his knees, and he was so apologetic. And that's when I saw his bars, and I apologized to him. He says, "No, don't worry about it." He says, "Is there anything I can do for you, son?" And I said, "Yes, sir, there is." I said, "Right in that tree over there, up in that tree," I said, "is a gook." And I said, "Over here is a 60. I said, "Can you have him top that tree for me, because he's firing from up there." I could see him.
You saw him?
I could see him up there shooting, yeah, from my position.
He was that close in.
Yeah, and
Goodness.
so those guys the guy with the 60 just topped that tree and took the guy out. But
how did the battle end?
Well, it ended for me when that first resupply came in. We
And
were
you were taken back to Pleiku.
to the 71st. Yeah, I was taken back to the. There was a battalion aid station, and I don't remember exactly where that was located with respect to between where we were in Pleiku, but I was there for a few hours and then transported down to the 71st Evac.
And got obviously immediate attention.
Mhm. Well, the immediate attention came. The more thorough attention started at the battalion aid station. That's when they cut my fatigues off, and that's when I got to see it for the first time. And when I lifted my leg and looked at it, I could see through where the bullet had gone, and it had blown everything out. But the back
you're
part of it
moving
was,
your legs so well.
well, they did a good job of patching it up and sort of reconstructing the muscle and whatnot. But it's years later, about 2 years later, after it was a year after I got out of the service in 1970, this took place. I think it was the summer of 71. This would have been summer of 71. I was at a lake in Arizona, and I saw this guy that looked really familiar as I was walking out to the lake with this girl I was going to the lake with, and he just looked so familiar. And I kind of walked over there to him and went up, and as the closer I got, I realized who it was. And I walked up to him. I said, "Lieutenant Jones," and he turns around. I said, "Lieutenant Charles Jones, 1st Battalion, 35th Infantry, 4th ID." And I walked up and put my hand out, and he backed away.
Because?
He backed away. I don't know exactly why. I could assume why, but he never told me. And then all of a sudden he looked at me, and he says, "Doc?" I said, "Yeah." And he looks at my leg. He says, "I heard they took that off." And I says, "No, they made the decision in Japan for me to keep it." But apparently, because that's where I remember the decision being made, that no, I think we can salvage this. But then they also made the decision at that same time that I was going back to the States. So.
So the resupply took you back out. Were there any others with you on that?
Oh yeah, there were probably 6. I think they probably threw about 6 guys there.
In various conditions?
Yeah. There were some of them I had taken care of earlier on, and then others that had all of them that were put on there were still alive. And this one guy that they put in, his head hit me right here. And I looked down. He was just kind of laying back in the chopper. So I don't remember. I reached across him or something to help hold him in position, because he wasn't very responsive. He was he was breathing, he was moaning, but like half his face was gone. And I don't think he survived that flight. I don't think he was alive when we got to the battalion aid station. But
the horrors of
the next over the next few days, when I was at 71st Evac, the chaplain came in, and he was the chaplain that had been out there with us that night. And he just shared with me what his experience was that night, and how horrific it was for him. And so I said, "So what was the final count that we had?" And officially, from what he told me, it was 4 dead and 36 wounded.
Wow.
of the GIs.
Wow.
So
that's pretty heavy.
That's
Lots of.
yeah, not as bad as other units. I mean, a friend of mine that I went to school with in grade school up north, he was one of, I think, 3 or 4 guys to come back when some 30 guys went out. But
You know, in sharing this story so far, Bill, it's just, I guess I am so frustrated just because, oh, how I wish Americans really knew, just really, really understood the suffering and the sacrifice of this specific war, all the others, but Vietnam, it just is so frustrating that people have been so dismissive of the suffering and sacrifice. Just this one right here, this horrific experience.
Well, a lot of the, excuse me, a lot of the people, and I'm talking generationally now, not necessarily individuals, but a lot of the people that were protesting the war in those days, in many cases, are now the ones that are in charge of companies in the countries and governments and municipalities and that sort of thing. So, to be honest, nobody gave a damn about the Vietnam vet when they came back.
I know that.
When we came back, and
that's why I want this to be recorded. Yeah. This is just so important because you are living history. Forget the history books or the pundits. You're the one that can tell the real story. And again, this is why this is so important. But so you were eventually back at Pleiku on to Camp Zama, Japan.
Well, yeah, I went from, I was about a week at Pleiku at the 71st Evac, and we actually got rocketed at the hospital that night, but one of those nights I was there, so they were still, it didn't end just because I was out of the field. They continued to mortar and rocket the compound.
Was there any, were there any heavy damages?
No, I don't know. I don't know. The tent, the medical unit that I was in, I mean, it was a GP medium tent with a wooden floor, a general purpose tent with a wooden floor. And if I remember correctly, there were sort of wooden sides that went up.
Up halfway.
Yeah, about halfway.
Right.
And of course, the heads of our beds were right there. But they came by. I was impressed. I mean, they came by and they threw extra mattresses on us and whatnot over the top of us in the event that, so to help protect us somewhat against shrapnel.
God bless the nurses and doctors.
Yeah.
Right up, literally on the front lines.
Yeah.
Bad. So they got you stabilized enough. So do you know? So they got you stabilized enough to medevac you out. Did you go again by Caribou down to Cameron? And how did you get out of the country?
You know, to be honest, I think it was probably a Caribou that went back down to
Cameron Bay?
I think it went back down to Cameron. There was a hospital down there.
Big one.
And I think, was that operated by the Air Force?
It was Air Force.
Okay, because I remember the Air Force guys were the ones that took care of me at that point in the move. And so I was there maybe one night or two nights, I don't recall. And then it was a C-141 to Japan.
Tell me once again, at what point they determined they could save your leg? When was that?
My understanding of it was after I got to Japan.
Japan. And how long were you at Camp Zama, Japan?
Until I got hit on June the 3rd, and I was at Camp Zama, Japan. I left there on July 20th, 1968.
Your family at this point now, it was the Red Cross then that notified your family of your injury?
I don't know if it was I don't think it was the Red Cross. What was interesting is what my stepmom told me that, and this was independent of my dad, because my dad didn't say this to me until I had a chance to talk to him. But my stepmom said that Dad had been up pacing the floor that night of the 3rd. And
just that X 6 cents.
Yeah, he was pacing the floor, and she said that all he could say was that something's happened to Bill. And she kind of poo-pooed him. No, you'd hear about it. You'd have heard something. The military would have called you or contacted you or something. And so his birthday was on the 5th, June the 5th. And it was on his birthday that Western Union came with a telegram rather, and gave it to my
Army
stepmom.
Officers, or, yeah.
No, I don't
Not
think
even
so. No,
Maybe that
we
would be
didn't
from
even get that
Casualty.
honor. Vietnam vets didn't get that honor. At least, not in my case. It wasn't. It was just a Western Union delivery guy that delivered it to my stepmom, and she was in shock
Of course.
because Dad had a premonition about it.
Wow. So did you get any kind of a telephone call from your family while you were at Camp Zama?
I talked to my dad once, that he had called, or I don't remember if he called or I called him, but they brought I want to say they brought a phone
Probably
by my
portable
bed,
phone.
and I was able to talk to him for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. But in those days, I asked him later, he said, that was a pretty expensive phone call, son. He said, it cost me $57. And,
Worth every penny.
yeah.
Oh, boy.
But,
So at that point then, about how many operations have you been through?
I had 5 operations on the leg and the back, and it's some of the times they did both at the same time.
Pretty
So-
good doctors in Japan?
Yeah, I had really good docs. The only one that I had any comments about one way or the other was a guy that ultimately sutured up the leg, and the flap of skin that was on the back of my calf. By the time they went, there were 5 debridements, and the bullet that hit the leg was also a tracer bullet. So there was a lot of burned flesh and muscle down inside the leg. That's why it took that many surgeries to debride it. But there was just a little strip of skin down the back of the calf, and these big wide holes in the side where they had ultimately trimmed off, cleaned up, and cut away so that there was something to salvage. Well, I think most reasonable surgeons would have grafted, a skin graft to cover those great big areas. But this young guy didn't. I understand that he was a resident from Thailand that was doing his surgical residency, and so all he did was just pull it all over to one side, tied it up, pulled it back over to the other side, and tied it up. And so I had these great big sutures in going down both sides, and ultimately they tore out anyway. So
Yeah.
I just left some pretty wide scars there. So
As the medic, did it help or hinder you to be injured and kind of know what's going on here?
from the perspective, the only time that I had an advantage in that was that this guy came in one time to change my bandage, and this was at Camp Zama, and he just did everything wrong. He broke sterile technique. It and I just told him, there's no way you're going to change that bandage. You don't know what you're doing, so I want somebody else in here that's changed some bandages. And he got kind of ticked at me, but
But that was the advantage of knowing what you
yeah,
Sure.
just knowing what should be done and how it should be done.
Sure.
The only other thing was a little more on the humorous side, but there was a fellow about 3 beds down from me that didn't. He just wasn't responding. He had been got shot and had a colostomy, but he was just given up. No reason for him to give up.
really demoralized.
And very, very, that's exactly the right word. He was very, very demoralized. And I just remember I don't remember his last name, but his first name was Rocky. And he was from Klamath Falls, Oregon. And so this other guy that was there, one of the attendants on my ward, he knew I was a medic, and so he came down and was talking. We were talking about this guy Rocky one time. He says, "Man, we just can't figure out what to do to motivate this guy." He says, "So I don't know. What do you think?" So I don't know where it came from, but I said, "Well, what you might think about doing is taking a tray, a little surgical tray, putting a green towel on it, a green surgical towel, take a 50 cc syringe, put a 6-inch cardiac needle on it and fill it full of milk and drape it down over the top of that thing and bring it in there and act like you're going to give this guy to him, to give this injection to him, and tell him it's because he's just not responding and you're not going to let him die." And so that's what he did. Of course, they obviously did not inject it, but just scared the daylights out of that guy. And he was low crawling out of that bed. That was the only time he wouldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. He wouldn't get up for anything. But he was low crawling out of that bed. He wasn't going to let him hit him with that.
That was a moment of inspiration, Nelson.
It was, because it worked. It did work.
It did. Well, let's see now. So moving forward, then you get to Letterman. By the way, you said you were in the country 3 months when this happened. Is that correct?
Yeah.
3 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the DD 214. It's, I think, 2 months, 28 days or something like that.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you're now at Letterman in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, was that close to home? Or?
Well, my dad
You're
lived
on
in
East Coast.
Bakersfield.
Oh,
My dad
okay.
lived down in Bakersfield, and they gave me the choice. I could go to Fitzsimmons in Colorado, in Denver,
That's where I was.
or Letterman, or I could go to Tripler in Honolulu.
I would have greeted you because I was there
Really?
at Fitzsimmons
Oh, okay.
in 68, 69.
Okay. Yeah, it would have been 68 that I would have come in there at the end of
I
68.
would have visited your ward.
Oh, for crying out loud.
It's a true story. So anyway, you did choose Letterman closer to.
Yeah, because I wanted to be close to Dad.
Sure.
I hadn't gotten to know him really well, over the years because they had divorced and we were living in Georgia and Florida and down in the South, and he was living out in California.
Did he get to come and see you?
No, he didn't come up to Letterman. But I was there for, July, August, September. I think it was about mid-August. They gave me a convalescent leave. And so I took a 30-day convalescent leave and went down to hang out with Dad.
I have to ask you, Bill, when you first got into America, you touched on land. Do you remember that? Do you remember that emotion or that time, just being on American soil?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Pretty.
It was a grand feeling. It really was a grand feeling,
Home.
and a immense sense of security.
Land you love.
And if I could have, I'd have gotten out of the bed and kissed the dirt. It was that kind of a feeling.
Coming home.
Mhm.
You bet. Very emotional. No place like America, being home. In spite of political things going on, it was still home.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
putting words in your mouth.
No,
but-
you're exactly right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. And not a bad place to go, Letterman, huh? Scenery
No.
from what you could appreciate that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so did you recuperate pretty well? Did you go through rehab there?
Yeah, yeah. They put me through. I went after my convalescent leave. It brought me back, and then I started in with a lot of physical therapy and just exercising the leg, and the back was pretty much healed up by that time because it was just across the the top of my rear end, the right cheek, just had blown that out. So there wasn't a whole lot of muscle damage or structural damage in that injury. I ended up getting most of my injections on that side afterwards because I couldn't feel them anyway.
Well, the silver lining.
Exactly.
So, then were you discharged from the service then after Letterman? Is that when that happened?
No, I got reassigned. I was sent back to duty, but reassigned to the 629th Medical Clearing Company down at Fort Ord. And it's kind of an interesting story there. It was the summer that they landed on the moon. Okay.
July.
In July. And so I was already there by that time, but I mean, it was while I was there that they landed on the moon. But
that's something.
I went to, yeah. They told us that the 629th was on alert. 629th was attached to NATO. So they said that now we were on alert to go to Europe for 30 days to play, or 60 days or whatever it was, to play war games. And I went to my CO and I said, I'm not going, I'm not going. And he says, well, you're part of this company. I says, then get me out of this company. I said, and I pulled out my medical profile, which says something to the effect of no running, jumping, prolonged standing, or marching. I said, so it's
and probably emotionally you wanted to stay home.
Oh yeah, and I told him, I said, I'm not interested in going over there and playing war. I just got out of one, and I'm not interested in going over there and playing it for 30 days or 60 days. Sure. And I had talked to my brother. He was already out, and he was going to school at the time down in Jacksonville. And so I told him that I didn't want to go. And he said, well, let me see what I can do. So maybe a week later, if it was even that long, we had our early morning roll call muster, 6 a.m. or whatever it was. And after that was over, the sergeant says, Ferris, captain wants to see you in the orderly room. So I went in, and he says, we had a congressional coming down on you. What's this about you going back to Vietnam? I said, I better not be going back to Vietnam because I'm not going. And he said, well, of course you're not. He says, you're on alert to go to Europe. He says, we're not on alert to go to Vietnam. I says, well, sir, I'm not going to Europe either. And I told him that even the same story. And I says, just transfer me to headquarters or something. But I had about a year left in the service by that time.
You paid your dues already. Yeah. You've proven your
So
point. Did they leave you alone?
Yeah, they transferred me to the headquarters company. But then what the irony of that was, stateside Army was such a the pits.
Playing Army?
Oh yeah, and just the games and the harassment and the what I just referred to as the stupidity of it all at the time. I did go back and later asked him. I said, I want to go back to Vietnam.
You did?
Yeah. I went back to him and he said, well, how much time do you have left? And I said, I got about 5 months left. He says, no, if you go back, you can go back, but you have to re-up in order for us to send you back.
What would you have done over there?
I'd gone back as a medic.
Out in the field again?
Yeah, wherever they needed it, yeah.
Wow.
I'd gone back as a medic. Because that's what I knew. That's what I was good at it. I knew I was comfortable with it. I wouldn't want to get hit again, but
Boy,
I knew the demand was still there.
Boy, that's quite remarkable to be willing to do that again. I think the emotional as well as the physical injuries would have been. But anyway, that's very remarkable. But you stayed the course at Fort Ord then, and that's where you were discharged later on. Okay, and then you went into the reserves, and then just fast forwarding, what did you decide you're going to do
For the rest of my life?
for the rest of your life? Obviously, you met that lovely lady, Maria.
Well, that came many years later. Many years later. out and went to college.
Where, in California?
I went to college one semester, one quarter at the time, I guess, or trimester, at Pacific Union College up in Angwin, California.
Beautiful area.
And I did fine there, but they wanted all their tuition up front, and I had made an arrangement to pay it off on an incremental basis as I went along, because with
You had
the
another GI bill? Yeah.
I had the GI Bill, and I had disability, I had applied for, but that hadn't started coming in yet. And and then I knew I could work the rest of the tuition off, whatever the GI Bill didn't cover, whatever my disability didn't cover, then I could work and pay off it. But they wanted everything up front, so I told them forget it. And so I left that school and went to Arizona, and ended up graduating from Arizona State.
Arizona State. What did you graduate in?
I got a degree in psychology with a secondary degree in chemistry.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting combination.
Yeah.
Where did that take you?
Nowhere.
I'm glad I asked.
Nowhere. I got a job, I was offered a job. I went through an interview process and was offered a job at the Arizona State Hospital, which is there in Phoenix. They had advertised a job in the forensic unit, and I went through the interview process there, and I was offered the job, but by the time I got through that oral, which was inside the unit, and I realized that every door I went through, somebody else was going to have to open that door for me to get out. I didn't like that feeling, and I obviously wasn't cut out for it, but I just didn't like that feeling of confinement and
Sure.
reliant on
Were you
everybody.
making the adjustment okay?
I think so. I thought I was making it. I ended up going to the VA there in Phoenix, and because of the experience there in 1970 or 71, I walked away from that place, and my attitude there was I'll never go to a VA hospital again, because they were the physician that I had been assigned to was so condescending, and as far as I was concerned, he was absolutely incompetent. I had worked my way through. I was working my way through college as both an EMT and also in the surgery of one of the other local hospitals. So I had worked with several doctors in the Phoenix area, there at Doctors Hospital in downtown Phoenix. And an example, a guy. I was going to school one morning, and by the time I got to class, my right foot was numb. And I didn't understand about neuroma and things of that nature at the time. So I get there, and I couldn't figure out why my foot was tingling, and I couldn't feel pressure on it when I would push on it and whatnot. So I made the appointment to go in, and I got this guy, Dr. Pepe was his name. And he comes in, he says, "Oh, so you don't have any feeling in your foot or something?" I said, "Yeah, something like that." I said, "Just numb." He said, "Well, take your shoe off." So I did. And he takes the back of his hand, and shoe and sock, he takes the back of your hand and places it on the top of my foot. And he says, "Well, your foot's cold, so it's definitely a circulatory problem." And I says, "Well, definitely a circulatory problem, huh?" He says, "Yeah, that's what I think it is." And I says, "Well, has it occurred to you that it's December?
Oh.
I'm wearing sneakers,
Oh.
and my other foot's cold too,
Oh.
and I don't have a problem with that one?"
Oh. Yeah.
And he got very nasty, and attitudinally nasty. "Well, what do you think it is then?" I said, "Well, I was under the impression it was more neurological." And he said, "Well, do you even know what neurology means?"
Wow.
I said, I don't need your insults, Doc.
Wow.
I said, just get me a consult with a neurologist, and we'll go from there, because I'm not dealing with you.
Wow.
Well, I'm not going to give you a consult with the neurologist, so he gave me one with a general surgeon.
Wow.
And ironically enough, I knew the surgeon, because he was consulting. He was a consulting physician with the VA there. And he says, Bill, he says, I can go in there. He says, what you have is neuroma. I can go in there and cut it out, but that very action is going to create more neuroma for you when it heals up. So you can learn to live with it, or you can go through this process every few years and get it cut out. So I just decided to live with it.
Just live with it.
Yeah.
No.
And then I never went to another VA hospital till I went to the one here in Walla
And you're
Walla.
happy?
Yeah.
Yes.
And very pleased out here.
Yes, I'm hearing.
Very pleased out here.
I'm hearing good things, and that's really good to know. Well, then you stayed in Phoenix and worked?
Yeah, for a year. For 10 years I was in Phoenix. Graduated school, got married, had a couple of kids, and I was working as a general manager of the Ramada Inn up in Williams, Arizona, which was, just about 60 miles south of the Grand Canyon. And but then things started falling apart in my marriage, and I made the decision to leave and took my youngest son with me.
Do you think it was a result of Vietnam, or just things in general?
Vietnam didn't help in terms of how I reacted to things. I didn't have the kind of patience I needed to have to make a marriage work. I didn't have that drive to make it work. And so I took the younger of our two children. The oldest was really attached to his mother. He was also the grandparents' favorite. And the second one, my second son, less so. So he and I took off, and I spent the next 16 years raising him and being single.
And the children's names are?
The oldest one is Michael.
Michael?
And the youngest one is Randall. And they're 41 and 39 respectively.
Grandkids?
And Randy will be 39, I believe it is this month.
And grandchildren?
Yeah. There's two grandchildren down there that Michael has, and my son's got two.
And four
children.
grandchildren. Can you name them for the record?
I know one of them. I don't know the daughter
That's fine.
the granddaughter down in Arizona. One of them's name is Tyler,
Okay.
and then my youngest son Randall is over in Portland with his two children, actually in Vancouver, and that is Amelia and William.
Okay, very good.
So.
So you eventually got to Walla Walla. Is this retirement then?
It is. I met my current wife. I was in the seafood industry for about 35 years, and I get when I left Arizona, I changed everything, changed careers, changed everything. So I got into the seafood industry, and actually met my wife, who is now my wife. She was a customer of mine at the store.
That's the way that works.
So
lovely lady.
we started dating. She started eating a whole bunch of seafood, and
yes, that's
claimed
how
she
that
didn't
works.
really like it all that much, but she started eating it. But
ulterior motives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you eventually came to Walla Walla for retirement. I just would like to know, have you stayed in touch with anybody from the Vietnam era? Any service organizations?
No.
Just put it behind you.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to Washington, D.C., to the wall?
No, that's an interesting thing. I did have the privilege of visiting the traveling wall. It came to Bellevue, Washington, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And I found some names. One of the names of the guys that I actually was in training with at Fort Sam. And he was the one that told me that this was the night we got our orders to go to Nam. I was the only one in the barracks that was sober that night.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else got drunk, and he was carrying his bottle of tequila around, and it was only about maybe a third of the bottle left. And I just asked him, I said, "Why are you doing that? Don't you know some of us are not going to come back?"
Mm-hmm.
He says, "I know that, Bill. I'm one of them."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, I know I'm not coming back, so I'm going to live it up while I can."
Mm-hmm. I think that's
And his name is on the wall.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow, really?
His name is on the wall.
I think that's kind of a common defeatist,
Mhm.
attitude. Well, now, Bill, in looking back on Vietnam, we touched on it a little bit. Through the year, after you got home, through the years, what is your feeling today about the decision for Vietnam, coming home, and did it change your life? I'm guessing it changed your life. I guess that's about 3 questions in one.
Yeah, I think it did. But, and I know this might not be the proper forum for it, but when my relationship to Jesus Christ changed, that's when my life changed.
And when was that?
For the better.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been during the late 80s, early 90s.
Was it one specific, not to get too personal, but
No,
just...
it was a process.
Mhm.
It was a process.
Mhm.
I have going through the Adventist educational system. I went through that from the 4th grade up through 1/4 of college, and I could tell you all about the Bible stories. I knew them backwards and forwards because they were very good at teaching the Bible stories. But the one thing that I did not have was a relationship with Jesus. I didn't know him. I knew all about him, but I didn't know him. And it was ironic during that time when I got out of the service and before I got married, I was dating this gal in Phoenix that was a nurse. And we were talking about these things one night, and she said, her husband had been killed in Vietnam. Her husband was an Air Force pilot. And she said something that really struck me. She says, "Well, Bill," after I described a couple of issues, "that makes you a real good Seventh-day Adventist. But she said, what you just told me makes you a good Seventh-day Adventist, but it doesn't necessarily make you a good Christian." And I had never put those two together the way as succinctly as she did. And so it was a long time after that. I mean, early on, I was not a good husband to my first wife. I was never a faithful husband to her. I was a good father to our 2 boys. But I am estranged from one of them now because of the way we split and left and what happened.
Sure, that's very, very understandable. It's not an uncommon story, for sure.
Mhm.
But life is not over yet.
No.
It's not over yet. But, wow. Well, yours so far has been an amazing, amazing journey. And goodness, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to share this story.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. See, I always get emotional at the end of these. Because it's just, our American patriots are so special. And just being willing to serve this country no matter what is just, you just get a loss at words. most of us will never fully, we'll hear your story, but most of us will never, ever know the walking in your boots, you know, what it's like. And I think I've mentioned before, a Korean War veteran said, you never, ever get over war. It's just it's very, very, like I said, I'm kind of at a loss, but just to say thank you so much.
Well, Dixie, you have done more to make my service, make me feel appreciated and honored
Oh, you are.
than I've ever felt in my life.
Well, that's,
Okay, and as outside, I'm talking about outside of family and friends. Okay, first with the honor flight program that you set up for me, and now you're part of this program, and it's your commitment, your dedication to this process, and to the American veteran in general is nothing short of amazing. It truly is amazing, and
I'm just, all I can say is I am so blessed. I have such a special privilege, such a privilege of sitting here and being face to face with heroes. It's just an amazing experience. Unsung heroes that are walking, you know, along in our streets, and nobody really knows. You just all these heroes, and I have such a privilege of getting to shake your hands and hear your stories. The privilege is all mine. Thank you for those
Thank you so
precious words.
much.
That makes all of this so worthwhile.